British leading men are sold as a fantasy, clean-cut, safe, effortlessly straight. The accent, the charm, the elegant restraint that makes audiences swoon. But behind that polish lives a quieter history. Warnings whispered by agents, careers shaped by fear, love treated like a liability. These 12 actors broke that script. Some lost privacy, others lost roles they'd trained their whole lives for.
A few lost years hiding in plain sight, performing heterosexuality as convincingly as they performed Shakespeare. But all of them eventually chose truth over the carefully constructed fantasy the industry demanded they maintain. Their stories expose how little has actually changed beneath the progressive surface.
Subscribe to discover what it really costs to be an openly gay leading man in an industry that still whispers the old rules while claiming everything has changed.
The Viscount who was told to stay quiet. In British acting circles, there's a sentence that floats around like a curse. There are two things we don't want to know, if you're an alcoholic or if you're gay. Jonathan Bailey heard that early on, and it lodged in his body like a warning label. Not because he didn't know who he was, but because the industry was telling him exactly what it would cost to be honest. Before red carpets, he was a kid who loved singing and dancing and learned fast how boy joy gets policed. He's described how cruelty around gender expectations can make you shrink yourself into a private safe room inside your own head. That's the first closet, not a door, but a decision to stop doing what you're born to do. Then Bridgerton happened.
Suddenly, he's the face of a heterosexual fairy tale, the safe leading man millions project their fantasies onto. And here's the cruel math. The bigger the audience gets, the smaller your personal life is allowed to be. Bailey has talked about how surreal it is seeing the word gay stapled next to his name everywhere. Pride, yes, but also a kind of branding nobody else would be forced to carry.
What did he lose by not playing the old game? Privacy, simplicity, the ability to date without strangers treating it like content. But he didn't vanish. He built the shameless fund, turning fame into money and grants without turning his soul into a public service announcement. That's the Bailey move. Boundaries, not bitterness. Proving you can be out, desired, taken seriously, and still refuse to be consumed.
The sweetheart who learned the closet can reopen. People talk about coming out like it's a door you walk through once and you're free. Joe Locke's story is messier and more real. He first came out to his mom at 12 and felt on top of the world. Then he panicked, deleted the post, claimed his Instagram was hacked, and went back into the closet for 3 years.
That's the part audiences hate admitting. Even in 2025, the closet isn't always a prison you escape. Sometimes it's a safety mechanism you rebuild because the world suddenly gets loud. Then Heartstopper turned him into a comfort object for millions. Charlie Spring isn't just a character, he's a mirror for queer teens, a soft place to land.
And when you become someone's representation, people start demanding receipts, labels, timelines, perfect politics. The internet watched what happens when fans treat sexuality like a customer service issue. What did being openly gay cost him? Range, at least at first.
Joe has said most casting he gets sent is for gay characters, and there are days he never wants to play another one. Not because he's ashamed, but because he's scared of being stamped as a single idea forever. What makes Joe different is he says the quiet part out loud, including the discomfort. He's admitted that some of his typecasting anxiety might be tied to internalized homophobia, and that naming it is part of getting past it.
His dream is to play a really macho straight man in an action film, not to prove he's masculine enough, but to prove queer actors are allowed to be everything.
The label they demanded and the joy he refused to lose.
With Ncuti Gatwa, the world tried to play a cruel guessing game. Say it, label it, prove it. And when he finally publicly described himself as queer, he made something crystal clear. He wasn't in the closet. He just hadn't invited strangers into his private life yet.
That distinction matters because it exposes how fame turns identity into a public utility.
Gatwa grew up in small Scottish towns, then hit Glasgow and stepped into queer nightlife, looking for belonging, only to meet a different kind of violence, being fetishized and grabbed in white gay spaces as a black man, attention that doesn't feel like desire but entitlement. Now scale that up to Doctor Who, a national religion with a global fan base.
The headlines love the milestone. He's been widely described as the first black lead doctor and an openly queer lead doctor. And with that history comes backlash. When he appeared in a Pride issue before he'd officially come out, people accused him of taking space from openly queer people, as if visibility is a seat you can steal, not a risk you survive.
So what did it cost him to be public? Control. People reducing a full human being into one debate topic. He said that keeping his queerness out of the public eye early on became more complicated than he ever wanted. What keeps Ncuti magnetic is that he doesn't respond with shame. He responds with clarity and joy. He's talked about therapy helping him confront internalized homophobia he didn't even realize he carried.
His win isn't just being out. It's staying playful, stylish, and bright while the internet tries to turn him into a battleground. The action hero raised to fear Armageddon. Before Luke Evans was Hollywood's tall, deadly, handsome fantasy, he was a kid inside a belief system that taught him the end of the world was scheduled and that being gay might mean he wouldn't survive it. He's talked about growing up as a Jehovah's Witness and literally thinking he'd die at Armageddon.
And here's the part most people don't know. Luke says he was bullied for being gay before he even understood what it meant. Not because he had a label, but because people could smell different on him and treated it like permission to hunt. That's how early the world starts teaching queer kids. Your softness is a target. Then he escaped into performance, the classic trade. I'll entertain you if you don't ask who I am. But the industry's deal is nastier than that. It doesn't just want silence. It wants a believable straight storyline, even when it's fake. Luke has said he basically had to come out twice, once in real life and again when the public narrative tried to drag him back into shadow. What did he lose by refusing to keep pretending? Control of timing, privacy, being just an actor instead of a headline people debate like it's sports.
But Luke didn't let that story end in shame. He turned the Survive Quietly script into a memoir, proof that the kid who was taught to fear the end of the world grew up and chose his own ending, rewriting his narrative entirely.
The possibility model, who grew up under erasure. Russell Tovey came of age in a Britain where the message wasn't subtle. Section 28 hovered over schools like a gag order. Don't promote homosexuality. Don't talk about it. Don't protect kids who are different. Just pretend they don't exist. He said he was openly gay by 18, but that doesn't mean it was safe. It means he did it anyway.
Here's the dark part people miss. Russell's recent work has circled back to the nightmare the system used to enforce silence. He's talked about acting in a film that explores LGBTQ+ rights and police entrapment in the 1990s, a reminder that the closet wasn't only social. Sometimes it was enforced like a trap. And that's the truth. The punishment isn't always one big blacklist.
Sometimes it's 1,000 small doors that never open, auditions where you feel the unspoken question, roles that go a different direction, the way leading man gets whispered like it has a straight price tag. Russell refuses the martyr costume, though. In a recent interview, he rejected the whole role model label and called himself a possibility model.
That's such a powerful reframe because it admits the real power of visibility isn't perfection, it's permission. His story proves that even growing up under laws designed to erase you, you can still become the proof that those laws failed, that visibility survived despite systematic attempts to prevent it, and that simply existing openly becomes an act of resistance against erasure.
Olly Alexander looks like the kind of guy the world assumes had it easy. Pretty face, pop star glow, the soft boy voice that sells romance. But his cute image hides a brutal understory.
Olly has opened up about self-loathing that fed disordered eating and self-harm when he was younger.
That's the part the industry loves to crop out, because suffering doesn't fit the fantasy unless it's packaged as a comeback. Then, It's a Sin happened, and the pain became bigger than him. Olly spoke about how moved he was seeing reports of a surge in HIV testing after the show, like a piece of TV cracked open a silence people were still living inside.
Imagine carrying that, not just fame, but the feeling that your face is now attached to other people's fear, grief, survival. And when he stepped onto the Eurovision stage in 2024, the world proved how fast it still punishes queer expression. There was backlash, second-guessing, online outrage. He even got emotional publicly about a performance decision in the run-up.
The Guardian noted the UK entry got 0 points from the public vote, a brutal reminder that visibility can still come with a receipt. But Olly didn't fold into bitterness. He keeps talking about mental health, keeps making work that forces conversations people avoid.
That's the real strength, joy that's been earned, not gifted, proving that authenticity in pop music can coexist with commercial ambition, even when audiences punish you for daring to be visible.
The quiet leading man who learned dignity has a price. Ben Whishaw isn't the kind of star who comes out with fireworks. He's the kind Hollywood loves because he feels untouchable, refined, private, serious. And that's exactly why his story hits harder, because the silence around him wasn't an accident. It was a survival strategy.
He's spoken about his 20s as a time when he didn't feel good about himself, tied to his sexuality and not knowing how to be himself, even fearing he'd be pigeonholed if people knew. That's the dark little trap. The industry doesn't always threaten you out loud. It just makes you believe honesty will shrink your future.
Then the public confirmation landed the most unglamorous way possible. A representative confirmed he'd entered a civil partnership with composer Mark Bradshaw, and the statement made a point of saying he'd never hidden his sexuality. He just didn't want to discuss his private life. The irony is brutal. Even when you're not hiding, the world can still demand a headline.
Ben later described how hard it was to come out with some sort of dignity while staying private. That line is everything, because it exposes the real cost. Not just roles or fame, but control, the right to be a person instead of a public lesson. When he did finally speak, he didn't sound bitter. He said his fears were mostly unfounded, and people were kinder than he expected.
That's power. Not loud power, but quiet power. The kind that refuses to turn trauma into a performance.
The scroll and you'll miss it coming out. Ben Aldridge didn't come out with a speech. He came out the way people confess truth when they're done being scared. One simple Instagram post in 2020. He wrote, "The journey to Pride was a long one for me. No PR tour, no glossy interview rollout, just a sentence that sounds calm and secretly screams, 'You have no idea what it took to type this.'"
And here's what most people miss. He came out carrying all the old industry superstition, the same fear every queer actor has heard whispered like gospel. Be honest and you'll stop being cast. The payoff was cinematic. Suddenly, he's leading big projects as a gay man, a husband and father in Knock at the Cabin, a partner in Spoiler Alert, queer love and genres that used to erase it.
That's not just career progression. That's rewriting what audiences are allowed to see. But let's bring the shadow back in. When you become the gay leading man, people start treating you like a category, not an actor. Some viewers praise you like you're brave for existing. Others act like you're pushing an agenda just by kissing your husband on screen. Aldridge's evolution is that he doesn't sell pain as personality. He frames it as freedom, being more alive, meeting himself in the work. His story proves that the quiet decisions, the ones that look small to others, can change your entire life and career trajectory more profoundly than any publicity campaign ever could. The brooding heartthrob who was bullied into silence. Richard Armitage spent years playing the kind of man audiences file under safe, brooding, masculine,
untouchable. And then, in real life, he finally said something that reframes his entire image. He's talked about being bullied for being gay and how it's affected his whole life. This isn't sad backstory for sympathy points. It's the missing engine behind his career.
Because when you're tormented as a kid, physically and verbally, you learn a skill that later looks like professionalism. You learn how to disappear in plain sight. He's also shared that he came out at 19 to anybody who mattered, and that how you identify isn't fixed. Read that again. He didn't build his life around a public label. He built it around truth with the people who deserved it.
That's the opposite of celebrity culture, which demands a neat caption, a neat headline, and neat box. And here's the darkest part. The bullying didn't end with school. He suggested it can be just as bad on sets. Grown adults still policing masculinity, still turning difference into a weapon. That's why some actors keep the closet door nearby even after they've unlocked it.
Armitage, turning his pain into storytelling, literally writing from it, shows the positive arc. The bully doesn't get the last word. His journey proves that surviving childhood trauma doesn't mean erasing it. Sometimes it means channeling it into art that helps others feel less alone. Rupert Everett, the man who came out too early. Rupert Everett is the cautionary tale of this list because he didn't come out in the era of brand-safe pride campaigns. He came out when the industry still believed a gay leading man had an expiration date. He said flat out that being gay stifled his film career, quoted as saying, "There's only a certain amount of mileage you can get as a leading man as a homosexual." That sentence is brutal because it's not emotional, it's logistical, like Hollywood was doing math on his humanity. And that's where the lesson lands. Everett's story proved the machine of silence wasn't imaginary, it was structural. If you were honest too soon, you didn't just lose roles, you lost the fantasy they were selling through you. But here's why he's powerful. He never turned into a broken man begging for approval. He turned into an artist who refused to lie. When he made The Happy Prince about Oscar Wilde's exile and decline, he framed it as a way of remembering what the world tries to erase. He's spoken about believing an artist should live in an integral way, offering the public the true self. That commitment to authenticity, even when it cost him everything Hollywood promised, makes him a prophet whose warnings the industry still pretends not to hear.
Everett's career trajectory proves that being right too early looks exactly like being wrong until history catches up. And by then, the person who spoke truth has already paid the price for everyone else's eventual freedom.
The Olympian who dove into truth. Tom Daley became Britain's sweetheart as a teenage Olympic diver, his face on cereal boxes and billboards. The pressure to maintain that clean-cut, family-friendly image was immense, especially as rumors about his sexuality circulated for years while he remained silent. In 2013, at just 19, Tom posted a YouTube video coming out as dating a man, Dustin Lance Black, the Oscar-winning screenwriter.
The announcement was gentle, almost apologetic, reflecting how terrifying it felt to risk everything he'd built on honesty. The response was mixed. Overwhelming support from many fans, but also backlash from those who felt betrayed by the revelation, as if his sexuality was somehow their business to approve. Tom faced questions about whether being gay would affect his diving, as if sexual orientation impacts athletic performance.
What makes Tom's story remarkable is what happened next. He became more successful, not less. He continued winning medals, got married, had children through surrogacy, and became an advocate for LGBTQ+ rights in sports, all while maintaining his athletic career at the highest level. His knitting during the Tokyo Olympics went viral, challenging stereotypes about what gay athletes look like and do.
Tom proved that you can be openly gay, unapologetically feminine in some ways, and still be one of Britain's greatest athletes. His journey demonstrates that the fears whispered by agents and industry insiders are often wrong, and that audiences are more accepting than the gatekeepers want to admit.
The national treasure who almost wasn't.
Stephen Fry is so beloved now that it's easy to forget there was a time when his sexuality could have destroyed everything. He came out publicly in the 1980s, when doing so was genuinely career-threatening, especially for someone in mainstream British entertainment.
Fry has been remarkably open about his struggles with bipolar disorder, suicide attempts, and the psychological toll of navigating fame while gay. He's described periods of profound self-loathing and the feeling that he had to be twice as accomplished to be considered half as worthy. What's particularly interesting about Fry's trajectory is how his intelligence and wit became both shield and weapon.
He could discuss his sexuality in interviews with such articulate grace that it became impossible to dismiss or mock him without looking foolish. He weaponized eloquence against prejudice. His marriage to Elliot Spencer in 2015 was celebrated widely, a far cry from the hostility that greeted his coming out decades earlier. Fry represents the long game, surviving long enough to see attitudes shift, maintaining dignity through the worst periods, and emerging as an elder statesman whose early courage paved the way for others. But Fry has also been honest about the cost: mental health struggles, failed relationships, years of feeling like an outsider even within gay communities.
His story proves that being a trailblazer doesn't mean you don't bleed. It just means you keep walking anyway.
12 British leading men, 12 different strategies for surviving an industry that sells them as fantasy while demanding they hide reality. The refined accent, the classical training, the elegant restraint, none of it actually protected them from the same brutal calculations every gay actor faces. Tell the truth and risk everything, or perform straightness and lose yourself.
What separates British actors from their American counterparts isn't the acceptance they face. It's the particular flavor of the closet they're expected to maintain, the stiff upper lip, the discretion, the suggestion that discussing one's private life is simply not done. It's the same silence, just with better diction. Some of these men lost roles they'd trained their entire lives for.
Others lost privacy, the ability to date without it becoming content. A few lost years hiding in plain sight, performing heterosexuality as convincingly as they performed Shakespeare. But all of them eventually chose truth over the carefully constructed fantasy. Their stories expose how little has actually changed beneath the progressive surface.
The warnings whispered by agents remain the same. Don't be too open. Don't scare the audience. Remember that marketability has an unspoken straight price tag. The language evolved, but the message didn't. These 12 men prove that authenticity is always the better choice, even when it costs everything. Because the alternative, spending your entire career hiding, costs even more.
Subscribe to ensure these stories reach the next generation of actors who deserve to know they don't have to choose between truth and success.